Get the reaction now from Deputy Treasury Secretary Wally Adeyemo. Wally, first, happy Friday. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Well, it's good to hear from you, Ed.
Yeah, and so President Biden, I wanted to say, he wants that tax cuts to expire. And if that happens, you heard Grady say, taxes would go up on people making less than $400,000 a year, breaking a pledge the president made during his campaign. The Tax Foundation goes on to say that if you're married with 2 kids, for example, making $85,000, taxes would increase by almost $1,700. So what do you say?
So I'm happy you asked that question because I want to be very clear. The president will not raise taxes on people who make under $400,000. In fact, what the president wants to do is cut taxes for American families by passing an advanced child tax credit, which would put money in the pockets of working class and middle class Americans who have children to help them pay for their needs. But the way he's going to pay for it is he's going to make sure that we increase taxes modestly on the wealthy and also on corporations. And you have to remember that one of the most important things we can do is think about our long-term fiscal trajectory. And the president wants to reduce our debts and deficit, whereas the last administration increased them by $8 trillion.
It might be hard to get everything he wants in a divided Congress, though. So I want to turn to other economic news. The PC inflation report out today shows overall inflation increasing year over year. Core inflation without food and energy prices basically moving sideways. So this is price increases, not prices coming down.
So it's important to remember where we're coming from in order to understand where we're going. And if we were talking a year and a half ago, inflation would have been far higher. But because of the action the president's taken and the Fed has taken, inflation has come down. And our expectation is that over the course of the year, it will continue to come down. But we know that there's more we need to do to reduce costs for the American people, and it's job number one for the president. That's why he's been focused on making sure that we reduce the cost of prescription drugs. When you look at what we've done with insulin, he's called on Congress to expand that by making sure that for all Americans, they don't have to pay more than $2,000 for prescription drugs a year going forward. There are a number of steps the president wants to take in terms of building additional housing to bring down the cost of housing and to help us expand the supply of things in the economy that will help us bring down costs for Americans, and that's what we're focused on today.
But that's all for a small group of Americans bringing costs down. Since President Biden came into office, food prices, for example, are up 21%, and the average hourly wages are down 2.5%. That's from January of 2021. So now we're seeing inflation go up again and GDP slowing. So is this the start of stagflation?
No. When you look at incomes are growing faster than inflation. And when you look at food costs, those have also stabilized. And what we know to be true is that input costs are coming down. And one of the things the president's called on companies to do is to pass those cost decrease down, pass those cost decrease to the American people. And I've seen that myself in terms of grocery shopping. I've stopped going to the grocery shop by my house and gone to the one by my church because there you've seen prices come down. And what he's saying is that the American people shouldn't have to go to different grocery stores. All the grocery stores should pass on the lower cost of input costs to American consumers.
Now, you have a huge portfolio over there at the Treasury. One of the things that you oversee are sanctions. And recently, the Treasury Department sanctioned Iran UAV program for its direct attack on Israel. Why not go after Iranian oil and add sanctions to the root of the money that Iran is making?
Well, Ed, in that package that you mentioned, we actually did go after oil shipments that were supporting the IRGC. So we're doing both, and we have to do both. We both have to go after Iran's sources of revenues to make sure they have less money to build weapons, but we also have to go after the supply chains of the weapons that they're building that aren't only destabilizing the Middle East, but as you know well, they're also shipping those weapons to Russia and using those to destabilize Ukraine. One of the most important things about the package of sanctions we put in place yesterday was it wasn't just the United States acting alone. We brought alongside with us our allies and partners in the United Kingdom and in Canada, and our goal is to continue to act to hold Iran accountable for their destabilizing activity.
But still, Iran made more than $36 billion over the past 12 months and exported a record amount of oil. You know, we're seeing what they're doing with the money. They're funding proxies that attacks U.S. positions, attacking ships in the Red Sea, funding Hamas. So why should they be allowed to have all this money? Why not go after more strictly the oil exports?
So, Ed, as I said, we're doing both. We're going after Iran's illegal sales as well as going after the weapons that they're building. And the action we took against the oil sales that were benefiting the IRGC is just one example of the more than 600 sanctions we've put in place against Iran, individuals and entities since the beginning of this administration. And what I want to make sure that your viewers here, but also the Iranian regime hears, is that we're committed to continuing to act, and not only here in the United States, but to building a coalition with our allies and our partners to hold them accountable for their destabilizing activity.
Do you feel like we have sanctions on Russia and the war continues? Do you feel like Iran will feel these new sanctions, or will this just, will they just brush it off?
We know that the Iranian regime is facing increasing pressure on their domestic economy, as well as increasing pressure to get access to the goods they need to build their weapons. And our goal is to make sure that that pressure continues to grow over time and to take actions to hold them accountable.
I want to ask you about the aid package the president has just signed and made law. It seizes Russian assets, makes it legal that are held. Now, my understanding is about $5 billion the U.S. has of the $300 billion that's frozen around the globe. Where are we on taking those assets to use in Ukraine, and how close is a deal for our allies to follow suit?
So Secretary Yellen's been raising this issue with our allies and partners for more than 6 months now, making sure that we're in a position to ensure, as the president has said, Russia pays for the damage that they've done in Ukraine. We're working these issues, and Congress's action now gives us the legal ability here in the United States to take possession of those assets and use them for the benefit of Ukraine. Our hope is to work with our allies and partners to find a strategy that will allow us to do that, to make clear to the Ukrainians that they're going to have the resources they need to defend themselves, but also to make clear to the Kremlin that Ukraine is going to have the support of our alliance and also the use of those resources to rebuild the Ukrainian economy.
Have steps started to actually take those assets that are here in the U.S.?
We've already taken steps with our allies and partners to design options for what we do with the assets, not just here in the United States, but as you mentioned, more than $200 billion of those assets, the vast majority, are outside the United States. And we want to make sure that anything we do, we take that action, bringing alongside our allies and partners in the same way the president has done throughout this war. And if we do that together, it'll put us in the best position to provide Ukraine with the support they need.
I still want to push you one more. Just is there a time frame for when we can actually see the assets, at least in the United States, taken, seized?
So I don't want to get ahead of the conversations we're having with our allies and partners, but to the point you made at the beginning, we have $5 billion of those assets in the United States. Our goal is to make sure that what we're doing in the United States, which is looking for ways to use those assets to benefit the Ukrainian people, is something that we bring our allies and partners along with. We hope that happens as soon as possible because we want to make sure that, in addition to what Congress did, which I think was critically important, sending Ukraine both military equipment to support their defense, but also financial resources to support their economy, that we demonstrate that we're willing to use Russia's assets to support the Ukrainian people. We think is urgent, critically important, and the President and Secretary are committed to working to building a coalition to do just that.
Wally Adeyemo, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it. We covered a lot of ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Yeah.